meaning that is going to have to be unraveled as the symphony goes along. And that is one of the things that makes it really unique. What he does in this movement, and again, we're going to talk mostly about the first movement, is he's like a dog with a bone. He will not let go of those four notes. And it is that sort of fanaticism that makes this movement, to me, the most perfect of any symphonic movement he writes, because he just won't let go. So what I'd like to do at this moment is actually stop talking for a second. I think that we should listen to a little Beethoven. I'm going to put these back on because I have really bad external speakers and I'm worried that it will impact your listening enjoyment.
All right, I'm going to do a little screen share. Oh, Sandra, can you enable screen sharing, please? Sorry, we should have checked that at the beginning. Okay, so let me see if I can. No, it's not about you sharing your own screen. It's about you enabling me to share my screen.
So Sandra, if you right-click on Jonathan in the participants window and make him the host.
Thank you, Sean. Perfect. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, here we go. Great. So now are you all seeing Beethoven Symphony in front of you? I'm going to take that as a yes. Great. So actually, I have a favor now because I'm worried that it won't go as well. Can you all please turn off your videos so that we can hopefully get as little lag as possible? Because I do not have a massively powerful computer here. So I think the less exact, great. There you go. Perfect. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So we're going to listen to the exposition now. The exposition is the first part of a first movement of a symphony. We're going to talk a little bit about what that means. I've picked a recording that I adore. It's with John Elliott Gardner and these period instruments. And what I love about this recording is that you hear it on the instruments that Beethoven would have heard it on, and it makes it fresh again, I think, to hear it this way. It's also very fast, which I appreciate. All right, here we go, Exposition, Beethoven 5. Sorry. Great. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you, if you want, to unmute yourself and give me just your impressions of hearing that much music. Like, how do you, if you had an adjective to describe it, how would you describe that?
Stirring.
Stirring, did somebody say? Yeah, I would say stirring.
I want to say wrestling.
You say rustling or wrestling?
Wrestling.
Oh, interesting.
Wrestling, like tension.
Tension, yeah, sure. There's a lot of tension in there. Absolutely, no question. Anybody else? I will take those two adjectives and I will work with them. So what I would say too, I agree with all of that. Would you also agree with bracing, by the way? Like that, and you can, everybody can remute yourselves for now if you want. That it's just the incredible rhythmic energy of it and the tautness of it, right? Is just still, you know, how we've all heard the piece, however many times
So
heard it. Oh, Susan, can you mute yourself? Okay, sorry. It's still that bracing, right? And so here's why. So I've told you, well, there are a couple reasons why. So I've told you already that he's going to, oh, and here I can take this out again.
You already that he is going to base the entire movement on this. Right? So that is, yeah, it's a four-note motif, but it's also a rhythmic motif, right? It's also ba-ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-ba-bum, right? And so if you put that on top of itself, or in succession, it turns into right? So he uses that rhythmic impetus to drive the music. And that's why it has that driving and bracing quality. One of the two reasons. The other thing is, what maybe you're not aware of, if you check the screen share, we're only at 1 minute and 18 seconds. That is very short for the first part of a symphony. Because Beethoven is working with such a small amount of melodic material, right? He has to create a form that is extremely taut. Very, very taut. And that's one of the things that makes it so exciting. And this is what I was talking about with how he adjusts his formal concerns based both on the sort of the compositional problem he's created for himself and on the emotional content that goes with it. Does that make sense? So what he does, and this is the other thing I wanted to ask you, if you had to guess, was that harmonically complex or harmonically rather straightforward? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
It's going to be one or the other. I'll say complex.
You happen to be wrong. I'm sorry. It's actually pretty straightforward. So just to give you a sense, it's a lot of this, right? And there's a reason for it. Like, just so you know what harmonically complex sounds like, everybody, Wagner is very harmonically complex, right? All this chromaticism, whereas this is diatonic and straightforward. And there's a reason for it. His rationale for making it also very harmonically tight, and I mean specifically the exposition, is he is making a very specific argument. How did the end of the exposition make you feel as opposed to the beginning of it? Does anybody remember? Did you feel different by the end, by where we got to? Not that much? Okay, so in an ideal world, and that's the thing, is because it's so driving, you can almost miss it. We have actually traveled to a very different place by the end of the exposition. We've gone from here to here. E flat major. Now, the reason for this is sonata form. And here also, I'm going to go through this as quickly as humanly possible. I do not want to burden you with things that are too technical, but it's useful for a discussion of Beethoven 5. Sonata form is how first movements of symphonies usually are structured. You begin with an exposition, which is what you just heard. The exposition is exactly what it sounds like. You state your ideas, sort of put forth your thesis, as it were. And they are usually two contrasting theme areas, right? So the first theme is usually more assertive, active, physical. Second theme, generally speaking, is more lyrical. And the second theme is in a different but related place. And that's really important. The idea is you take a journey in the exposition, and then later you have to find your way back home. So there is inherently a narrative aspect to sonata form, which Beethoven then builds on. Make sense to everyone? So what Beethoven does in this exposition is he sets out two very different opposing ideas, right? C minor, tragedy, and something more optimistic, E flat major. I will note, though, it's not where we have to get eventually, right? We have to get back to the home key of either C minor or C major. We'll get back to that again. So now that we've done that, I think what I would like to try with you a little bit is to break down some of the genius of what actually happens in this moment, in this exposition, because
it's worth taking a second to go like, wow, look at what he's doing. So let's go back to the beginning for a moment, and I'm going to narrate a little, okay? So here's the beginning. Great. So very basically, we have that. Then he just outlines the C minor chord. Continues, works up the rhythmic excitement. And then he stops dead. That is totally bizarre. This is like to actually just stop right in the middle after you've developed all this kind of rhythmic activity. Nobody else would do that other than Beethoven. And this gets to a critical point that I want to make. Beethoven remakes every rule in his life. That's what makes him the center of musical history, is that any rule that applied to classicism, he breaks and remakes. And he ascribes to classical models in some way, shape, or form throughout his life. But he is constantly pushing the envelope, and that's why he's the guy. Like the distance from Beethoven 1 to Beethoven 9, you can't gauge in years alone, and it's because he keeps breaking every rule. This particular moment will come back. It's really important, almost more for its return than for this. But still, stopping in the middle, and then something slightly new, and maybe we'll go someplace new. Maybe he'll do something. He's like, nope, I am making my very straightforward case. We are stuck in C minor, and so we just go on. So let's just keep listening for a moment. Still C minor. Straightforward harmonically. Very C minor. Oh, listen. First big harmonic moment, right? It's been like really straightforward harmonically up until right there. That is called a diminished chord, and it is freighted with anxiety because it is two tritones together, which are the devil's interval. Also, it is very unstable. And a diminished chord needs to resolve, and it can go anywhere, which is really important. At this moment, let's listen to where it goes. Now note, we're only 40 seconds into this piece. We're already about to begin the second theme group. That is really, really fast. Here we go. Oh, difference, right? Yeah, contrast. I would say this is a second theme group. Suddenly something lovely, something lyrical, but, and as I said, because he wants to establish these two polar opposites, right? Optimism. However, because he's a great storyteller, and like anybody who's telling a great tragedy, which is what the first movement is, he doesn't want you to forget the stakes. So even this very optimistic horn call that begins it, just hear that before we break into this, is secretly the opening. Here's the opening. take out the second repeated figure and open it up. That's all it is. And then even this theme, I don't know if you noticed in the cello and bass, you can't get away from the rhythmic motive. It is everywhere. And then by that point, he's already moving on. He's just done. So let's listen again. We're moving. You can hear we're moving. Oh, tension, right? Maybe something problematic. No, good old E flat major. Great. Nothing could go wrong. Everything's great. E flat major. Fantastic. Uh-oh. Right, okay. So, but look how fast that journey is, right? And that's what makes this piece so exciting. And why he also has to choose the battles he chooses, like total harmonic simplicity in the exposition, so that he can just like set out these two poles and just thrill you, but in that really taut form. So now we're going to get into the development. The development is exactly what it sounds like. You take the themes that you've already put out and you develop them. And you can see that Beethoven is going to be a master of this, right? Because I've already told you he can take little tiny blocks and spin them into golden thread. Apologies for the mixed metaphor. This development is very special, even for Beethoven. First of all, it stays only in minor keys the entire time, so it's very dark. He never brings back in the entire thing. So again, all dominated by that first theme, very, very dark. He basically uses the development to amp up your anxiety, to be perfectly honest, and to drive home the stakes of the first movement. So let's just listen and I'll narrate a little bit as we go on. Okay. Oh, actually, no, we have to move on. Sorry, I think this is it. No, that is not it. Nope. Apologies, I think it's right about here. Just one more moment. Okay, this is the end of the exposition again. Back in E flat major. Everything's good. Life is looking up. I'm feeling optimistic. Uh-oh. Developments. F minor, not important, only that we're always in minor keys. You can hear we're moving. D minor, home key. We're moving again, G minor. Terrifying buildup. Finally, he stops the harmonic motion, and it's on what? A diminished chord. Now, just like back in the exposition, but last time, remember, it went into this? Not this time. This time, he amps up the anxiety and moves up. Listen to him do it. That's the horn call. Doesn't sound so optimistic anymore, does it? Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I have to talk about this for a second. What he's done is he's taken the horn call and he's done something that only Beethoven can do. He has developed two notes of it, right? Because, oh, I actually have to go backwards for a second to find it, sorry. Okay, right there. So he takes the second and third bar of it, these notes, just 2 notes, and first they come in the strings, in the winds, and then he answers in the strings. And then again the winds, and then again the strings. Winds, now he's moving, and now just 1 note, 1 chord, and then the same chord. And now we are as far away from C minor as we can possibly go, or F sharp minor. And total stasis, and only Beethoven has the chutzpah to just go back and forth between the same chord. That takes incredible confidence. And you can feel the tension that you can cut with a knife, right? So that when he interrupts it again with the main motif, it's terrifying. And then he will return again to, oh no, a diminished chord. And that puts him right where he needs to be. To get back to the beginning. So let's listen for another moment. Chords, 2 chords, 2 chords, strings, winds, strings, wind, string, chord, 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 chord. Total stasis. Total stasis. Shock. Stasis and terrifying stasis because it's a diminished chord. Shock. Terrifying, isn't it? So scary. And now we are back in the recapitulation. So there are, I think I actually left this part out. There are traditionally 3.5 parts, let's say 4 parts of a sonata form. We heard the exposition, then comes the development, and then the recapitulation. And the recapitulation, exactly what it sounds like. We restate the ideas from the exposition, only this time they stay in the home key. In this case, C minor. Now there's a trick. A minor key recapitulation can either stay in C minor or it can go to C major. That does not happen in a major key symphony. Classical music wants to go to the major. This tension that Beethoven brings into the Fifth Symphony is inherent in classical music. It wants to end happily. It doesn't want to end tragically. It wants to get to the major. The vast majority of pieces end in the major. So that's an option. And so what Beethoven does, by comparison to a lot of other recapitulations, recapitulation sounds like a dry word, right? It can be, because it's just the restating of the ideas. But I'm going to bet that Beethoven does not let it be dry. Let us hear. That's insane, what just happened, for the record, in case you were wondering. To stop, remember how I said you're not allowed to stop the music? That's not how composition works. Stops it and puts in an oboe cadenza. As if, and it's an incredibly powerful rhetorical device, because it's literally as if to set the oboe against the rest of the orchestra. Like in the middle of this incredibly rhythmically driving movement, right? It's all about rhythmic drive. Drive, 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 stop. And it's literally as if the oboe is to say, please stop the madness, right? Like, please just release me from all this just non-stop pain. Do you think he gets his way? Let's find out. Obliterated. Okay, so just quickly, We've now gone back through the part of the exposition that leads into the second theme group. He's got used the diminished chord, and now he's going to stay in C instead, just as if it was the easiest thing in the world to do. So now here comes the big question. Are we going to get to stay in C major, happy, joyous C major, or are things going to end more grimly? Let's find out. Oh, C major. Not nice. It's the second theme, lyrical. Isn't that pretty? A little tension. This seems a little concerning. You can hear elements of C minor. But at that moment, it turns. And it's all C major. Great. How happy. Let's listen. Maybe I'll keep that way. Now, we have a problem. He could have stopped right there, and we would have been fine. Did you see it? Would have been a fine ending. We have a coda. Coda, before Beethoven. Coda literally in Italian means tail. It's usually just like a little itty bitty epilogue, you know, just a way to say kind of goodbye to the movement before Beethoven. The difference with Beethoven, I mean, and you can understand, like, you know how a tail is not a particularly structurally important part of an animal, I think. I'm not a veterinarian. But similarly, a coda before Beethoven is not a structurally important part of a symphonic movement. Beethoven changes it because remember how I said recaps, you know, it's a recap, right? You're just restating ideas. He wants to make it more personal. He wants the ability to increase the drama. And he's, in order to do so, he makes the ending more elevated. And that's going to be a theme in what he does with the symphony more broadly as well. So let's listen to the coda now for just a moment. Sounding a little grimmer. Recognize that chord? That's our old friend, the diminished chord, with a little motif right afterwards. And I have a feeling more grim things are coming. Yeah, I'd say the news is pretty bad, right? So remember how I said that the initial horn call is just really the opening opened up, right? The opening motives opened up and with the repeated notes dropped in the middle. So now he reveals that that was a con at this point. Remember how I also said the great thing that Beethoven does is he creates problems that he has to solve. One of the problems he had to solve was like, is that, you know, are we going to end optimistically? Are things going to be okay? No, because now we hear this version of the horn call, which is the original intervals from the opening. And it's just heartbreaking. Like, it's forget any optimism. This is reality until the end of the movement. And we go on and on. Okay, I just want to see if we can give you a little other taste of one moment of the coda. And then we have to quickly get onto these other movements. He brings back the main motif one more time. Listen to that. Listen to the oboe. Okay, so the only reason I wanted you to hear the very end of the movement, well, two reasons. Wanted you to be sure that you knew that it didn't end well. And also I wanted you to hear the poor oboe get obliterated one last time. Did you hear the oboe? The final pleading. And it's perfect. that movement. And I hope you understand why. Like, I hope that having listened to it with a narrator gives you a sense of how Beethoven marries that incredible formal abilities, incredible constructive abilities to this deep emotional narrative. Now, before we run out of time, we have to get to these other movements just a little bit. We're just going to touch on them. So the second movement, which I think is right here, please be right here. Ah, great. Okay, second movement, lovely, but it's a funny guy a little bit. Remember I talked a little bit about the tension between between like purely compositional concerns and trying to craft a larger narrative? It really comes home in the second movement a little bit. So let's just listen for a moment. Okay, so it's pretty, right? But is there something a little incongruous about it? I mean, so it starts with a nice enough tune. Again, you're not going to sing it in your shower. It's nice, it's pretty. Then to get suddenly to doesn't quite fit. And particularly within this form, which is the theme and variations that he then breaks, it's brilliant. But he's doing it for a very specific reason. He's foreshadowing, right? We're in lovely A flat major, which is a fine place to be for a second movement. And then not abruptly, but just a little bit forced, we're suddenly in C major, which is where we want to get to for the finale, right? And so suddenly the trumpets are playing. Here they go. Right, trumpets are playing, horns are playing. There they are. They look great. And it's a little strange in a movement that is, you know, basically supposed to be a songful movement. That's what a second movement is. And again, here it's sort of, you can see the tension a little bit, right? Between needing to craft this larger narrative and trying to make something that really compositionally just stands by itself. Like, I love the second movement. You won't hear me say anything against the second movement, but if you heard it by itself, outside of the context of this symphony, it wouldn't work nearly as well, I would say. And that's all I'm going to say about the second movement. Listen to it, listen to this recording of it. Third movement is literally perfection here. We're just going to listen for a moment. Apparently. Oh, I know what I'm doing wrong. I have to press refresh. There we go. Oh, there we go. By the way, if anybody needs to leave at any point, of course, feel free. I think I'm going to go a little bit long, but I'm going to try to keep it as close to 6:30 as I can. Here's the third movement. Great, right? Just so great. This really creepy C minor theme. And all these hints of the first movement with this outline of the C minor triad and this question. You can hear the question. And another question. And an answer. Sound familiar? Four repeated notes is awfully close. That's the kind of symmetry that exists throughout the symphony. That's what another thing that just makes it so tightly constructed and so genius. And so in the third movement is a scherzo. A, B, A form. You have a trio in the middle, C major, great, it's great. Here's what's incredible about the scherzo. I mean, in and of itself, it would be wonderful. Is what he does at the ending of it that nobody has ever done anything like before. What makes it just absolutely, totally new. Come on, little computer. Okay, you can do it. Here we go. No. Can everybody turn off their video again, please? Just for a moment. We're almost done. Here we go. So here's the slow, the main music from the scherzo again, but soft now with pizzicati. In the strings, they're plucking. Everything is very spooky. Super spooky, super spooky. And then this. And I'm just going to let you listen. Isn't that great? So what he's done there and what nobody has done like before, so that is to lead directly from the third movement into the fourth movement with this incredibly suspenseful transition. And here is why that's so important. Traditionally, third movement in a symphony is the lightest movement. Scherzo literally means joke. Before it was a minuet, it's a little dance of kind of minimal importance. What he's done now is made it critically important to the narrative, right? Because now there's this transition from the world of C minor to total suspense. And then triumph. No one has ever done anything like that before in a symphony. No one ever. This is totally brand new and it's wild. Like this is what is elevating this form to a totally new place. And what makes it like such a romantic centerpiece is suddenly it is about self-expression, but also formally, my God, he is reinventing the form to suit the emotional needs of the work. And it is so affecting. You can hear that, right? The build and then to have that release. I mean, yeah, he's the guy. So fourth movement is basically more of what you just heard. It's a lot of rah, 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 except for one moment, which is the final thing that I'm going to show you, and then we'll take some questions. And again, at any point, if anybody feels they need to go, feel absolutely free. The thing about raw joy, as opposed to raw terror, is it's a little less interesting. Does that make sense? you know, in movies, you need a conflict. In drama, you always need a conflict. And so we've made it now, right? And so in a way, Beethoven has to create interest still. Or otherwise, it's just going to be like awfully rah-rah. And it's pretty rah-rah, to be honest. But he does this. I want you to hear this because this is also something that nobody else has ever done. This is my final musical example for the night. Let's hope it works. Okay, here we go. Fourth movement. Big build up. What's this? Sound familiar? Yeah. So you can all turn your videos on now, again, if you want. So what he's done is he's brought back the music from the third movement to then reject it, to like create the sense of like, oh, we're not out of the woods yet, right? We're not out of the woods. And this, again, no one has ever done anything like this. This is a totally new way to think about what a symphony could be. You know, and it's thrilling. It's just thrilling. And what it does to what he does in the process is he adds more weight to the finale. Finales before Beethoven were kind of a little bit thrown off too. But in order to make a satisfying narrative arc, actually.
In order to make a satisfying narrative arc, he needs more weight at the end, right? And he does that by making a longer last movement and also by doing this little throwback to like elevate the tension, you know, and it is a remarkable work. I think what I would like to do now, I'm gonna put this, we can actually stop the share. Hold on a second. Copy this link. I'm gonna stop the share. I am going to put this link to this recording for everybody, because I think it's great and I think everybody should watch it. And I'm gonna ask if anybody has any questions or thoughts that they wanna share about the symphony or about what I had to say about it. I mean, you know, the thing about Beethoven 5 is we've all heard it so many times in some way, shape, or form, right? And so what my hope was to shed a sort of different kind of light on it, just so you can sense again, like, wow, he was breaking every rule. You know, the reason that it's enduring and the reason that we all know it so well, ironically, is because it's so absolutely new. You know, now it's in a way, the least new thing that it's the least new thing that we could know, right? It's been around for 200 years, but the reason that it endures is because it was so bracingly new. I think you can say that about a lot of great art, but boy, it really applies to the symphony. So does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask or any thoughts?
So I have one. This is Susan.
Hi.
So I called it revolutionary. And based on that, I'm wondering at the time how his contemporaries, other composers, viewed this piece.
You know, so you have to remember, there's not, the other people who are around right when Beethoven is writing this, they're not all super remarkable. It's people like Hummel. It's great. There's nothing wrong with Hummel. You know, Schubert enters the picture soon. We know more, you know, its first performance actually was very underwhelming because there were about 1 million pieces on it. The orchestra was under-rehearsed. The person who really elevates it is actually E.T.A. Hoffmann, right, the writer. He's the person who writes this lengthy review about Beethoven 5 and says, like, this is romanticism in musical form, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. And that sense of it is what endures. The actual premiere performance of it, I think, was sort of a wash. But again, as I mentioned, the influence on later composers, post-Beethoven, you can't overstate. You know, there's a reason Brahms 1 begins in C minor and ends with C major. You know, it's just, you can't overstate the influence of this symphony. The 3 Beethoven symphonies you can't overstate the importance of actually are Eroica 5 and 9. And in the next 2 talks, oh, I don't know if you remember to record it or not. In the next 2 talks, I'm actually going to talk about Beethoven 3 and Beethoven 9 because they are similarly influential for different reasons. But yeah, this one, yeah, it really just, it endures the most.
Jonathan?
Yes, please.
It's Sandy. I have a thought and a question. My thought is that, as you very well stated, Beethoven was practically totally deaf at this time. And
Go ahead.
And I sort of have the feeling that if he wanted to leave a legacy, he didn't want to continue with what had been done prior. And so the 9th, it's so new, it's so almost radical that it's the beginning of something new, and it really can't be compared to what came before. There are similarities, but yet the differences make it so unbelievably unique. That's almost as if he fully intended to start something so new that others that came would follow him, would be after him.
I think that is accurate in that he is definitely mindful of his legacy. And also, you know, Beethoven's deafness, it's complicated, right? But like, particularly when we get to his, Beethoven 5 is middle period Beethoven still. So I'm embarrassed to admit, but I believe he's not fully deaf yet at this point. By the time, no idea what that would be. By the time you get to Beethoven 9, he's totally deaf, completely deaf. And you can hear it in some of the musical choices. There are some balances that don't quite work, but also, and I think this is something you're getting at, he is so in his own world by the time of Beethoven 9 that his musical imagination in his latest years is unfathomable. Like the things that he can do at that point and the worlds he takes us to are kind of beyond imagination. And it's actually almost, I mean, I love the Ninth Symphony, but it's more, you hear it more in the late quartets, actually, where he'll just do things that he totally breaks form. The things to remember about symphonies is they're public forms, you know? And so the Ninth, in some ways, is still, it's still a public form. And so it's less radical than the late quartets, which are just wild, like, and still sound to us, I think, just wild. The Ninth Symphony, by comparison to the late quartets, is actually conservative. Like it follows a narrative similar to Beethoven 5. Actually, it also begins in the minor, ends with something kind of anthemic, right? Something very anthemic in the case of the Ninth, but it actually follows the narrative of the Fifth in some ways, whereas the other works late in his life by this point, he would not be going backwards in the same way at all. Yeah.
And a question.
Please.
When Beethoven wrote the symphony, he was also responsible for determining which instruments would be included, when they would be focused upon, when they would be excluded. That's almost like a painter who is painting the picture of the palette. It's so amazing how he was able to focus on what the instruments were, what they would sound like. By the ninth, he was hearing it in his head. But I mean, how?
I mean, that's just
Does one write music and then determine which instruments to plug in? Or do you know what instruments you're going to use and then you just take it from there?
It's the musical genius of him, you know, that's just his musical genius. I mean, and remember, you know, deafness is something that came on to him, so he certainly knew what everything sounded like. But yeah, orchestrationally, like in terms of choosing instruments, I mean, yeah, he's incredibly adept. I don't know if you noticed, you can really see it in that recording. He only brings in the trombones for the fourth movement. I don't know if you saw them stand up in that excerpt I showed you.
I was actually closing my eyes
Okay.
so I could hear it.
So yeah, he's very, I mean, it's fun. We don't think about Beethoven specifically about his orchestrational gifts as much as he's not a colorist exactly, but man, he sure knows exactly what he wants, and he gets it right from the beginning right to the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this brilliant interlude.
You're so welcome, Sandy.
This is awesome. Thank you, Jonathan.
You're so
Awesome.
welcome. Anybody else, any thoughts or questions that you want to add?
How long a time between the first symphony that you did, the last presentation, and
It's not as long as you would think. 10 years? I think a little less.
Huh.
Actually, I looked at I'm actually embarrassed. The dates are not my strong point. I think it's more like 6 years.
Wow.
Hold on, right
Look it
now.
up.
Google it. He evolves, you know, really, really fast.
Yeah.
So fast. And the other thing to keep in mind is that he's already, by the time he writes the first symphony, he's a young man, but he's already established. And the other thing to keep in mind is when the first symphony is published, he already has started sketches on the fifth. Like he's always thinking ahead. I mean, and that's also kind of shocking. Like just how fertile the mind is and how it continues to develop, you know?
Thanks.
Any other questions, thoughts? Should we say goodnight, Sandra? What do you think?
Sure. If nobody has any other questions, then, you know, we really appreciate everybody being here. And thank you so much, Jonathan, for your time and keeping us all engaged. You know, it's interesting. We usually say goodbye to everybody in May and hello again in September. And so we're trying new things this summer, as is everybody. We really appreciate you guys hanging in there with us and sticking in with us. We hope that we see you on the 14th when we do our next conversations. And again, this Saturday, our brass quintet night's program, and it was a beautiful day. They taped outside. If you join at 4 o'clock, you can see on Facebook, and then again, we'll put all the links on our website and stuff. But just keep talking us up to your friends and keep joining us at these presentations. Enjoy your summer. So thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Jonathan.
And Jonathan, may I say, it's a way to keep us connected. We miss it so much, and this is a way to keep us connected during a very difficult time in isolation.
Yeah.
Be well, everybody.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay
Have a
safe.
good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
It was excellent, Jonathan. Thank you. Pretty excellent.
Thanks.